What's good, folks? I looked it up after the last kind of episode, I guess. Last chapter is a better way to put it. I looked it up after the last chapter, and I believe the pronunciation is Tathagata. It's kind of like contested online, the correct way to pronounce it, it seems like. But that's what I'm going to go with, is Tathagata. Um, I've got my hot beverage. Today it's orange and spices. That was the name of the blend. So um, take a sip and we'll get into it. When we left off, our boy Sun Wukong was being punished for his actions by Buddha. Okay. Chapter 8. Our Buddha creates the scriptures and passes on perfect bliss. Guanyin obeys a decree and goes to Shangan. If you try to ask about the dhyana or investigate the innumerable, you will waste your life and achieve nothing. Polishing bricks to make mirrors or piling up snow to turn it into grain. However many years have you wasted like that? A hair can contain an ocean, a mustard seed can hold a mountain, and the golden Kasyapa only smiles. When you are awakened, you will surpass the 10 gates and the 3 vehicles, and stop the 4 kinds of birth and the 6 types of reincarnation. Who has ever heard before the cliff of thoughts extinguished, under the tree that has no shadow, the sound of the cuckoo in a spring dawn? The path by the cow stream is dangerous. The vulture peak is high in the clouds. Here the voice of the ancients was a mystery. On a cliff 10,000 feet high, 5-leaved lotuses bloom. As scent coils round the shutters of the old palace. At that time, your knowledge smashes all the currents of thought. The Dragon King and the 3 treasures can be seen. This lyric poem is set to the tune Su Wu Man. Our story goes on to how our Buddha, the Tathagata, left the Jade Emperor and went back to the Thunder Monastery, where he saw the 3,000 Buddhas, 500 Arhats, 8 great Vajrapanis, and countless Bodhisattvas standing under the pair of Sala trees at the foot of the Vulture Peak, all holding banners, canopies, jewels, and magical flowers. The Tathagata brought his propitious cloud to a halt and addressed them thus. With my deep insight, I surveyed the 3 worlds. The origin of nature is ultimately emptiness, like the great void, containing nothing at all. The subjection of this evil monkey was a mystery beyond understanding. It is called the beginning of life and death. Such is the appearance of things. When he had spoken, a sacred light filled the sky with 42 rainbows that linked north and south together. All who saw them bowed, and a moment later the Buddha gathered together some felicitous clouds and climbed to the supreme lotus throne, where he seated himself in majesty. Then the 3,000 Buddhas, the 500 Arhats, the 8 Vajrapanis, and the 4 Bodhisattvas came forward to bow to him with their hands together and ask, who was it who wrecked the heavenly palace and ruined the peach banquet? The wretch was a monkey fiend, born on the mountain of flowers and fruit, the Buddha replied, whose towering crimes would begar description. None of the heavenly generals were able to subdue him, and when Lord Lao Tzu refined him with fire after Erlang captured him, he was unharmed. When I went there, he was in the middle of the Thunder Generals, giving a great display of his martial prowess and spirit. I stopped the fighting and asked him what it was all about. He said that he had divine powers, was able to do transformations, and could ride a somersault cloud for 36,000 miles at a single jump. I made a wager with him that he could not jump out of my hand, then grabbed him, turned my fingers into the 5 Elements mountain, and sealed him under it. The Jade Emperor opened wide the golden gates of the Jade Palace and invited me to be the guest of honor at a banquet to celebrate peace in heaven. He gave to thank me. After that, I took my leave of him and came back here. They were all delighted by the news, and they congratulated him effusively. After which they withdrew group by group, each to go about his duties, as all rejoiced in the divine truth. Indeed, propitious vapors filled paradise. Rainbows surround the Venerable One. The Western Paradise, known as the best, is ruled by the Dharma King of non-phenomenon. Black apes are always offering fruit. Deer hold flowers in their mouths. Blue phoenixes dance. Colored birds call. Sacred turtles offer long life. Immortal cranes present magic mushrooms. Here they peacefully enjoy the pure land of the Jetavana Park, the infinite realms of the Dragon Palace. Every day, flowers bloom. Fruit is always ripe. Through practicing silence, they return to the truth, achieving reality by contemplation. There is no birth nor death. They neither wax nor wane. Mists follow them as they come and go. Untouched by heat or cold, they do not notice the years. One day, as the Buddha dwelt in the Thunder Monastery on the Vulture Peak, he called together all the other Buddhas, arhats, guardian deities, bodhisattvas, vajrapanis, monks, and nuns, and said, "As we are beyond time, I don't know how long it has been since the crafty ape was subdued and heaven pacified, but by earthly reckoning, it must be about 500 years. As today is a fine early autumn day, and I have a precious bowl filled with 100 kinds of rare flowers and 1,000 varieties of exotic fruit, what would you say to our having an ulambana feast?" They all put their hands together and performed the reverence of going round him 3 times in acceptance. The Buddha then ordered Ananda to hold the bowl of flowers and fruit, while Kasyapa laid them out. The hosts were moved to gratitude, which they expressed in verse. The poem on happiness went, "The star of happiness shines bright before the Venerable One. Gifts of happiness spread wide and deep, ever richer. Fortune is boundless and lasts as long as earth. A happy fate has the luck to be linked with heaven. Fields of happiness are widely sown and flourish every year. The sea of happiness is mighty and deep, never changing. Happiness fills heaven and earth, leaving legacies of happiness. Happiness grows beyond measure, eternally complete." The poem on official rank went, "With rank as high as a mountain, colored phoenixes call. With rank ever increasing, we praise the evening star. Salary raised to 10,000 bushels and a healthy body. Salary raised to 1,000 tons, and the world at peace. Rank and salary equaling heaven, and eternal too. Rank and fame as great as the sea, and even clearer. Rank and favor, continuing forever, greatly to be admired. Rank and nobility without bounds, like 10,000 kingdoms." The poem on longevity went, "The star of longevity shines towards the Buddha. The glories of the land of longevity start from here. Fruits of longevity fill the bowls, glowing with good omen. Longevity's flowers are newly plucked and placed on the lotus throne. Poems of longevity, pure and elegant, full of rare conceits. Songs of longevity sung with exquisite talent. Life as long as sun and moon. Life that will outlast both mountains and seas." When the bodhisattvas have presented all the poems, they ask the Buddha to expound the fundamentals to them. Then the Tathagata opened his excellent mouth and expounded the great law and retribution. He spoke about the wonderful scriptures of the three vehicles and the theory of the five aggregates, as contained in the Surangama Sutra. The deities and nagas gathered round, and flowers came raining down in profusion. Indeed, the meditating heart shines like the moon in 1,000 rivers. The true nature embraces 10,000 miles of sky. When the Buddha had finished his sermon, he said to the host, "I have observed that the morality of the living creatures of the 4 continents varies. In the eastern continent of superior body, they worship heaven and earth. Their minds are livery, and they are even-tempered. In the northern Kuru continent, they are given to killing living things, but they only do it to feed themselves. They are stupid and lazy by nature, but they do not trample much on others. Our western continent of cattle gift has people who neither covet nor kill. They nourish the vital essence and submerge the spirit, and although they produce no saints of the highest order, they all live to a ripe old age. But in the southern Jambu continent, they are greedy and lecherous, and delight in the sufferings of others. They go in for a great deal of killing and quarreling. That continent can with truth be called a vicious field of tongues and mouths, an evil sea of disputation. I now have the 3 stores of truth scriptures with which they can be persuaded to be good." On hearing this, all the bodhisattvas put their hands together in submission, then went forward to ask, "What 3 stores of true scriptures does the Tathagata have?" "I have 1 store of the Vinaya, the law, which is about heaven. 1 of Sastras, expositions which are concerned with earth, and 1 of Sutras, or scriptures, which save ghosts. The 3 stores consist of 15,144 scrolls in 35 classes. They are the scriptures for cultivating the truth and the gate to real goodness. I want to send them to the eastern lands because it is intolerable that the beings of that quarter should all be such stupid wretches who slander and defame the true word, do not understand the gist of my law, and have lapsed from the orthodox Yogacara sect. How am I to find one with the magic powers to go to the east, choose a worthy believer, and bid him make the arduous crossing of 1,000 mountain and 10,000 rivers in search of the scriptures until he finally comes to this abode of mine to receive them? When he does come, they will be sent to the east forever to convert all living beings, which will be a blessing as big as a mountain, a cause for congratulation as deep as the sea. Is anyone willing to go and find him?" The Bodhisattva Guanyin went up to the lotus throne, and after going round the Buddha 3 times by way of salutation, she said, "Your untalented disciple wishes to go to the east to find a man to come and fetch the scriptures." All present raised their heads to look at the Bodhisattva, her understanding filling out the four virtues, wisdom filling her golden body. From her necklace hang pearls and jade. Her bracelet is made of jewels. Her hair is black clouds skillfully piled like coiling dragons. Her embroidered girdle lightly sways, a phoenix wing. Sea green jade buttons, a gown of white silk gauze, bathed with sacred light. Brocade skirts, a girdle of gold, shielded by propitious vapors. Eyebrows like crescent moons, eyes like a pair of stars. A jade face full of heavenly happiness. Scarlet lips making a touch of red. Her pure bottle of sweet dew is ever full. The willow twigs in it are always green. She delivers from the 8 disasters, saves all living beings. Great is her compassion. She stays on Mount Tai, lives in the southern sea, rescues the suffering when she bears their cries, never failing to answer every call, infinitely divine and miraculous. Her orchid heart admires the purple bamboo. Her orchid nature loves the fragrant creeper. She is the merciful ruler of Pororaka Island, the living Guanyin of the Tide Cave. The Buddha was very pleased to see her. No one but the venerable Guanyin, whose divine powers are so great, will do for this mission, he said. What instructions have you for your disciple as she goes to the east? Guanyin asked. You must watch the route all the way, said the Buddha. You may not go via the Milky Way, but if necessary you may have a little cloud or mist. As you cross mountains and rivers, you must note the distances carefully to enable you to give full instructions to the man who will come to fetch the scriptures. But that true believer will, I'm afraid, have a difficult journey, so I shall give you 5 treasures for him. The Buddha ordered Ananda and Kasyapa to bring out a brocade cassock and a 9-ringed monk's staff. Give this cassock and staff to him who will come to fetch the scriptures. They are for him to use. If he is determined to come here, he can avoid the wheel of reincarnation by wearing this cassock, and he will be free from evil if he carries this staff. The Bodhisattva bowed and took them. The Buddha then produced 3 bands. These precious things are called tight bands, he told the Bodhisattva as he handed them to her. Although all 3 of them look the same, they have different uses. I also have 3 band-tightening spells. If you meet any devils with great magic powers on your journey, you should persuade them to reform and become the disciples of the pilgrim who will come to fetch the scriptures. If they do not do as they are told, these bands should be put on their heads, where they will of themselves take root in the flesh. If the appropriate spell for each one is recited, the victim's eyes will bulge, his head will ache, and his forehead will split open. He will thus be certainly induced to adopt our religion. When he finished speaking, the Bodhisattva bowed eagerly and withdrew. She told Huyan, the novice, to accompany her, and he took his iron staff weighing 1,000 pounds with him, so that he could as a demon-quelling strongman for the Bodhisattva. The Bodhisattva wrapped the cassock up in a bundle and gave it to him to carry. She then put the golden bands away safely and went down the Vulture Peak with the staff in her hand. The journey was to have consequences. The Buddha's disciple comes back to his original vow. The venerable golden cicada is dressed in sandalwood. When the Bodhisattva reached the foot of the mountain, the gold-headed immortal of the Jade Truth Temple stopped her at the temple gate and invited her to take some tea. But she dared not stop for long, and so she said, "I have been given a sacred command by the Tathagata to go east and find a man who will come to fetch the scriptures." "When will he arrive?" the immortal asked. "It is not definite," the Bodhisattva replied, "but he will probably reach here in 2 or 3 years' time." She took her leave of the immortal. As she traveled amid cloud and mist, she estimated the distances. There are some verses to prove it. She cared nothing of the journey of 10,000 miles to find him, but worried about finding the right man. Looking for the man seemed to be very chancy, but how can it be a mere coincidence? One who teaches the way for the wrong motives will distort it. He who explains it without faith will preach in vain. Whoever will try and know it with his whole being is bound to have a future ahead of him. As the teacher and her disciple were on their journey, they suddenly noticed 1,000 miles of weak water, which was the river of flowing sands. "Disciple," said the Bodhisattva, "this will be hard to cross for the man who will come to fetch the scriptures, as he will be of impure bone and mortal flesh. How will he do it?" "Teacher, how wide does the river look to you?" asked Huyan. The Bodhisattva stopped her cloud to investigate. She saw, joining up with the deserts to the east, reaching the foreign kingdoms in the west, Wuj in the south, the Tatars in the north. It was about 300 miles across and 3 million miles long. As the waters flowed, it was like the earth turning over. The waves were like rearing mountains, broad and boundless, vast and mighty. From 3 miles distance the mighty flood is heard. Immortals' raft do not reach here. Lotus leaves cannot float on it. The sun slants through withered plants and bathes the crooked shore. Brown clouds block its light and darken the long bank. How could merchants pass this way? Has a fisherman ever moored here? No geese alight on the sandbanks, but apes cry on the distant shore. Its color comes from bountiful red smartweed, while delicate white duckweed drifts together. As the Bodhisattva was surveying the scene, she heard a splash and saw a hideous ogre leap out of the waves. He was not really blue, not really black, with an evil face. Neither tall nor short, bare legs and a muscular body. His eyes flashed like a pair of tortoiseshell lanterns. The corners of his mouth were as sinister as a butcher's cauldron. Protruding fangs like swords, red hair matted and unkempt. He roared like a clap of thunder, and ran across the waves with the speed of wind. This ogre climbed up the bank with a pole in his hands to catch the Bodhisattva, but was stopped by Huyan's staff. "Don't run away!" Huyan shouted as the ogre advanced towards him. The battle that ensued between them was quite terrifying. Moxa, with his iron club, using his divine powers to protect the Bodhisattva. The ogre with his demon-quelling pole, displaying his valor for all B was worth. I'm assuming that's meant to say for all he was worth. There are typos here and there. A pair of silver dragons dancing by the river. 2 holy monks in battle on the bank. The one used his skill to control the river of flowing sands. The other had distinguished himself in protecting Guanyin. The one could make the waves leap and roll. The other could breathe out fogs and gales. When the waves leapt and rolled, heaven and earth were darkened. In the fogs and gales, sun and moon were dimmed. The demon-quelling pole was like a white tiger coming down from the mountain. The iron club was a crouching yellow dragon. When one goes into action, it beats the undergrowth to start the snakes. When the other lashes out, it parts the pines to flush the sparrowhawks. They fight till the sky goes dark and the stars twinkle. Then the mist rises, and earth and sky are dim. The one has long been unrivaled in the weak waters. The other has always been the hero of Vulture Peak. When the pair of them had fought several dozen rounds inconclusively, the ogre blocked his opponent's iron staff and asked, "Where are you from, monk, that you dare to take me on?" "I am Prince Moxa, the second son of the pagoda-bearing Heavenly King Li," the other replied. "I am also Huion the Novice. I am now protecting my teacher on her journey to go to the east to find the man who will fetch the scriptures. Which monster are you? How dare you stand in our way?" The ogre then realized who he was. "I remember," he said. "You used to cultivate your conduct with the Guanyin of the Southern Sea in the Purple Bamboo Grove. Why have you come here?" "Can't you see my teacher standing there on the bank?" When the ogre heard this, he chanted, "Na-ah-ah!" several times to show his respect, withdrew his pole, and let Moxa seize it, then bowed to the Guanyin and said, "Forgive me, Bodhisattva, and listen to what I have to tell you. I am not a demon, but the curtain-raising general who used to stand in attendance by the imperial chariot in the Hall of Miraculous Mist. Just because I accidentally smashed a crystal dish at a peach banquet, the Jade Emperor had given me 800 strokes of the rod, exiled me to the lower world, and made me look like this. And on top of it all, every 7 days he sends a flying sword here to stab my chest over 100 times before it goes back again. It's agony. I get so unbearably cold and hungry that I have to emerge from the waves every 2 or 3 days to devour a traveler. I never thought that in my ignorance I would insult the merciful Bodhisattva today." "You were exiled here for a crime against heaven, but now you are deepening your guilt by harming living beings. I am now going to the east on the Buddha's orders to find the man who will fetch the scriptures. Why don't you become one of us and ensure yourself good retribution in future by accompanying the pilgrim as a disciple and ascending to the western heaven to pay homage to the Buddha and seek the scriptures? I will see to it that a flying sword stops coming to pierce you, and when you are successful, you will be forgiven your crimes, and your old job will be given back to you. What do you think of that?" "I am willing to return to the truth," the ogre replied, then went closer as he continued. "Bodhisattva, I have lost count of the number of people I have eaten here, and I have even devoured some pilgrims who are trying to fetch scriptures. I throw the heads of all my victims into the river, and they sink to the bottom, as not even goose down will float on this water. But the skeletons of those 9 pilgrims floated, and would not sink. I was so impressed by this that I threaded them together with rope and play with them in my spare time. But I am afraid that the man who is to fetch the scriptures may not get this far, which would wreck my future. Of course he'll get here. the Bodhisattva replied. You should hang those skeletons from your head and wait for him. They will come in useful. In that case, the ogre said, I shall await your instructions. The Bodhisattva then laid her hands on his head and administered the monastic rules to him, chose for him the surname Sha, sand, and gave him the Buddhist name of wujing, awakened to purity. Then he entered the monkish life and took the Bodhisattva across the river. He washed his heart, cleansed his thoughts, and stopped killing living creatures. All he did now was to wait for the pilgrim who would come to fetch the scriptures. After leaving him, the Bodhisattva and Huiyan hurried on towards the east. When they had been traveling for a long time, they saw a high mountain veiled with an evil mist, and they were unable to climb it on foot. Just when they were intending to cross the mountain by cloud, a gale wind blew up and a monster suddenly appeared. He, too, was very menacing to behold. His entrails hung from his mouth, rolled up and knotted. His eyes were like rush fans. His eyes shone gold. His teeth were sharp as steel files, and when he opened his mouth, it was like a brazier. His golden helmet was tied firmly around his cheeks. His armor, bound with a silken sash, was a python's sloughed-off skin. In his hands he held a nailed rake like a dragon's claw. At his waist hung a curved bow the shape of a half-moon. His martial might overawed the Year planet. His overweening spirit threatened the heavenly gods. He rushed upon them, and without a second thought, smote at the Bodhisattva with his rake. Moxa the novice parried his blow, and shouted at the top of his voice, Remember your manners, damned monster, and watch out for my staff. Monk, the other replied, you don't know how to keep yourself in one piece. Mind my rake. At the foot of the mountain, the pair of them rushed upon each other as they struggled for supremacy. It was a fine battle. The fierce and murderous ogre, Huiyan imposing and able. The iron staff could pulverize the heart. The rake struck at the face. The dust thrown up darkened heaven and earth. The flying sand and stones startled gods and ghouls. The nine-toothed rake gleamed and flashed as its pair of rings resounded. The lone staff was ominously black as it whirled in its owner's hands. One was the heir of a heavenly king. One defended the law on Pororaka Island. The other was an evil fiend in a mountain cave. In their battle for mastery, none knew who the winner would be. Just when the fight was getting really good, Guanyin threw down a lotus flower from midair to separate the two weapons. The monster, shocked at the sight of it, asked, Where are you from, monk? How dare you try to fool me with a flower in front of my eyes? I'll get you, you stinking flesh-eyed mortal, replied Moxa. I am a disciple of the Bodhisattva of the Southern Sea, and this lotus was thrown down by her. Don't you know that? By the Bodhisattva of the Southern Sea, do you mean Guanyin, who eliminates the 3 calamities and saves from the 8 disasters? The monster asked. Who else could I mean? Retorted Moxa. The monster threw down his rake, bowed to him, and asked, Where is the Bodhisattva, elder brother? May I trouble you to introduce me? Moxa looked up and pointed. There she is, he said. The monster kowtowed to her and shouted in a shrill voice, Forgive me, Bodhisattva, forgive me! Guanyin brought her cloud down to earth and went over to him and asked, Are you a wild boar? become a devil or a pig-turned monster? How dare you block my way? I'm neither a wild boar nor a pig, the monster replied. I used to be Marshal Tianpeng in the Milky Way. Because I took some wine to seduce the Moon Maiden, the Jade Emperor sentenced me to 2,000 hammer blows and exile in the mortal world. My spirit had to find a womb to occupy. But I lost my way and entered the womb of a sow. That's why I look like this. I ate up my sow mother, drove all the other pigs away, and seized this mountain, where I keep myself by eating people. I never meant to offend you, Bodhisattva. Save me, I beg you. What is this mountain called? The Bodhisattva asked. It's called the Mount of Blessing, and the cave in it is called the Cloud Pathway Cave. Second Sister Luan, who used to live there, saw that I knew how to fight and asked me to be the head of her household as her husband, but she died within a year and all her property became mine. As the days lengthened into years, I found that I had no way of supporting myself, so I had to eat people to keep myself going, as I had done before. Forgive me my sins, I beg of you, Bodhisattva. There is an old saying, the Bodhisattva replied, that goes, if you want to have a future, don't do anything with no future in it. You broke the law in the upper world, and since then your vicious nature has not been reformed. You have further sinned by taking life, so this surely means that you will be doubly punished. Future, said the monster angrily. According to you, I should have lived on air. As the saying goes, by the government's law, you're beaten to death, and by the Buddha's law, you starve to death. Clear off, clear off. If you don't, I'll capture this pilgrim and eat this plump and tender old woman. I don't give a hoot if it's double sinning, triple sinning, or sinning 1,000 or 10,000 times over. If a man wishes to be good, heaven will certainly allow him to be, said the Bodhisattva. If you are prepared to submit to the truth, there are, of course, ways to feed yourself. There are the 5 kinds of food grains, and they are sufficient to assuage hunger. So why eat people to keep alive? When the monster heard these words, it was as if he awoke from a dream, and he said to the Bodhisattva, I would love to reform, but isn't it true that a sinner against heaven has nowhere to pray to? I'm going to the east on the orders of the Buddha to find the man who will fetch the scriptures, she replied. You can be a disciple of his and make this journey to the western heaven. Thus you will gain merit and atone for your crimes, and I will see to it that you are freed from disaster. I'll go with him, the monster said over and over again. The Bodhisattva then laid her hands on his head, and he accepted the monastic rules. She gave him the surname Zhu, pig, because of his appearance, and gave him the Buddhist name Zhu Wuneng, pig awakened to power. She ordered him to adhere to the truth and only eat vegetarian food, cutting out the 5 pungent vegetables as well as the 3 forbidden things. Wild goose, dog, and fish. He was now to wait single-mindedly for the pilgrim who would come to fetch the scriptures. The Bodhisattva and Moksha then took their leave of the pig awakened to power, and continued on their way by low-altitude cloud. As they were traveling along, they heard a jade dragon call to them in mid-air. Which dragon are you? The Bodhisattva asked as she went up to him. And why are you undergoing punishment here? I am the son of Aorun, the Dragon King of the Western Sea. Because I burnt up the bright pearls in the palace, my father reported me to the court of heaven as a rebel. The Jade Emperor had me hung up in midair and given me 300 strokes, and I am to be executed any day now. I beg you to save me, Bodhisattva." When she heard his plea, the Bodhisattva went in through the southern gates of heaven with Moxa. Here they were met by the heavenly teachers Kui and Zhang, who asked them, "Where are you going?" "I would like an audience with the Jade Emperor." The two heavenly teachers hurried in to announce her, and the Jade Emperor came out of his palace to receive her. The Bodhisattva went forward to greet him, and said, "On my way to the east on the orders of the Buddha to find the man to fetch the scriptures, I met a wicked dragon suspended in midair. I have come here especially to ask you to spare his life and give him to me, so that I can teach him to serve the pilgrim with his legs." On hearing this, the Jade Emperor issued a decree pardoning him, and he sent a heavenly general to release him and give him to the Bodhisattva. The Bodhisattva thanked him for his generosity and left. The young dragon kowtowed to show how grateful he was for having his life spared, and he obediently did what the Bodhisattva told him to. She took him to a deep ravine where he was to wait until the pilgrim came. When that happened, he was to turn into a white horse and achieve merit by going to the western heaven. On receiving his orders, the young dragon hid himself. The Bodhisattva led Moxa the novice across this mountain, and they hurried on towards the east. Before they had gone much further, they suddenly saw 10,000 beams of golden light, and 1,000 wisps of propitious vapor. "Teacher," said Moxa, "the place where all the light is coming from is the Five Elements Mountain, where the Tathagata's restriction order is posted. This must be because that great sage equaling heaven who wrecked the peach banquet and threw the heavenly palace into chaos is imprisoned there." "That's right," Moxa replied, and teacher and pupil climbed the mountain together to look at the paper. On it were written the true words, Om Mani Padme Bum. And when the Bodhisattva saw them, she sighed deeply and composed a poem that went, "Pity the evil monkey who did not obey the Lord. In his arrogance he showed off his valor in the old days. In his folly he wrecked the peach banquet, and he had the effrontery to sin in the Tushita palace. In the army of 100,000 there was none to match him. His might was felt above the ninefold heavens. But now he has been caught by our Tathagata, the Buddha. Will he ever be able to unleash his talents and win more glory?" The conversation between teacher and disciple had disturbed the great sage, who shouted from under the roots of the mountain, "Who's that up there?" When she heard this, the Bodhisattva hurried down the mountain to visit him. At the foot of the mountainside of the local gods, the mountain gods and the heavenly generals who were guarding the great sage all bowed to the Bodhisattva in greeting and took her to the great sage. She saw that he was pressed down inside a stone box so that he could speak but could not move his body. "Monkey," the Bodhisattva said, "do you know who I am?" The great sage opened wide his fiery eyes with their golden pupils, nodded his head, and shouted at the top of his voice, "Of course I recognize you. You, thank goodness, are the all-compassionate, all-merciful deliverer from suffering, the Bodhisattva Guanyin from Potoraka Island in the Southern Sea. You're a very welcome visitor. Every day here seems like a year, and nobody I know has ever come to see me. Where have you come from?" "I received a mandate from the Buddha to go to the east and find the man who will fetch the scriptures," she replied. "And as I was passing this way, I decided to come over and see you." The Buddha fooled me and crushed me under this mountain. I haven't been able to stretch myself for 500 years. I desperately hope that you will be obliging enough to rescue me, Bodhisattva." "You wretch," she replied. "You have such an appalling criminal record that I'm afraid you'd only make more trouble if I got you out." "I have already repented," he said, "and hope that you will show me the road I should follow. I want to cultivate my conduct." Indeed, when an idea is born in a man's mind, it is known throughout heaven and earth. If good and evil are rewarded and not punished, the world is bound to go to the bad. The Bodhisattva was delighted to hear what he had to say. "The sacred scriptures say," she replied, "if one's words are good, they will meet with a response from even 1,000 miles away. If they are bad, they will be opposed from the same distance. If this is your state of mind, then wait while I go to the east to find the man who will fetch the scriptures. I'll tell him to rescue you. You can be his disciple, observe and uphold the faith, enter our Buddha's religion, and cultivate good retribution for yourself in the future. What do you say to that?" "I'll go, I'll go," the great sage repeated over and over again. "As you have reformed," she said, "I'll give you a Buddhist name." "I've already got a name. It's Sun Wukong." The Bodhisattva, very pleased, said, "I made 2 converts earlier, and their names both contained Wu, awakened. There's no need to give you any further instructions, so I'll be off." The great sage, now aware of his own Buddha nature, was converted to the Buddha's religion, and the Bodhisattva devotedly continued her search for a saintly monk. After leaving that place, she and Huion carried straight on to the east, and before long they reached Shangan, the capital of the Great Tang. Putting away their mists and clouds, teacher and pupil turned themselves into a pair of scabby, itinerant monks, and went inside the city of Shangan. It was already dark, and beside the market street they saw a shrine to a local tutelary god, and went in. The local god was thrown into confusion at the sight of them, and the devil soldiers quaked with terror. They knew that she was a bodhisattva, and kowtowed to her in greeting. The local god then scurried off to tell the city god, the lord of the altar, and the gods of all other shrines in Shangan. When they knew that the Bodhisattva had come, they all went to report to her and said, "Bodhisattva, please forgive us for our crime in being late to welcome you." "You mustn't let a whisper of this get out," she said. "I have come here on a decree from the Buddha to find someone to fetch the scriptures. I shall be borrowing your temple for a few days while I find this true monk, and then I shall go back." All the gods returned to their own shrines, and they took the local god to stay in the temple of the city god. Teacher and disciple disguised their true appearances. If you don't know whom they found to fetch the scriptures, listen to the explanation in the next installment.